While Clebius was buying time and managed to stop Lucy's rampage, Zix himself was still confused about what he should do now. He realized that there was no more time, he had to make a decision immediately. Zix then called Lortel and was about to say something to her, but, before he could even say something to Lortel, the window beside them standing suddenly broke. They were then surprised to see it. But what made them more surprised was the cause of it. It turned out to be caused by Janica, who just crashed into the window of the room they were in. Janica then fell on Lortel, accompanied by the broken glass that surrounded the two of them. When Janica looked at the person she fell on, she was then surprised to find that the person turned out to be Lortel. Lortel was confusedly calling her. Without explaining the situation to her, Janica then shook off the water that was now soaking her body. After observing the room for a moment, she then saw Tanya, who was behind Zix. She was happy to have finally found her. The room suddenly fell silent for a moment amidst the confusion that engulfed the three of them at this time. Lortel felt strange when she saw Janica's face, which still looked normal. She was confused, why she didn't seem to feel anything about the rumors about Ed. She even wondered if she was really going crazy now, but after looking at her carefully, she felt that it was not the case. After looking around towards Zix and Lortel, Janica then hesitantly asked, "Did I miss the mood or something?" Right after that, Marilda then appeared near them. She replied, "No, instead, you appeared at the right time. This is the right time." When Ed appeared to stop Lucy, hearing Clebius, who swore at him, Ed then turned to him and called him, "Is that you, Clebius?" Clebius' condition was really battered at this time until it was difficult to recognize. Hearing that, Clebius said that he realized he really got beaten to a pulp. He knew it was pointless to fight. Even if he risked his life and caused a scene, he wouldn't even reach her toes. He was well aware of that, so, he felt that he should have just run away earlier, but, he cursed, he wondered if he was the only fool here. Despite being too weak to stop it, people still rushed forward to do something, whatever it is, even though no one ordered them. They destroyed what they had worked so hard to build without the slightest hesitation. Amidst the outpouring of heart that Clebius let out, Elvira then ran over to him. Clebius was really confused by such a mindset. Wouldn't it be wiser to just give up and run away? But, even though they were on the verge of death, they still believed that they could be something like heroes. He cursed, "Why the hell don't they just let me run away?" In the end, they didn't win either. Again everything was messed up. All that struggle, still be in vain. Hearing Clebius outpouring, Ed then walked closer to him, and gently held his shoulder. He then thanked Clebius and Elvira. He said that he was indebted to both of them. He also told Clebius that his efforts were not in vain, they were really valuable. When she saw the face of the cloaked person, Elvira then shockingly called him. Clebius was really relieved at this time. He kept muttering, "I'm really just a dumb, useless worm, an idiotic trash bastard, I know, I know." Elvira then shockingly called Clebius when she felt his body suddenly weak, until finally Clebius fell unconscious on her lap. Elvira then felt anxious seeing that. She then immediately told him to get a grip. Seeing that, Ed still couldn't wake up from his shock. Honestly, he was surprised. He really knew the fighting ability of every important character in this academy inside out, but, including himself, he didn't think anyone could do something like this. At least it took about 10 minutes for everyone to be evacuated. In that long time, they managed to survive alone, against the final boss of Act 3, the failed swordsman of Sylvania, the awakened one, Lucy Merrill. Lucy herself was suddenly silent at this time. She didn't move or speak when she saw him. Ed then walked over to her. He apologized to her for not telling her about it. He explained, "An old man really wanted me dead, but I was indeed in a terrible situation where my life was hanging by a thread, so I couldn't prepare for anything in advance. That's why I didn't have the chance to inform you." Hearing that, Lucy didn't say anything, and immediately hugged his body. With a teary face, Lucy said that she thought he was dead. Hearing that, Ed said, "As you can see, I am alive, I am here, in front of you." After saying that, Ed then hugged her back. They continued to hug in the rain that poured down on them while surrounded by the statues of the maids and students who had been petrified. Meanwhile in the corridor of the Awfulest Hall, Zix's worry in his heart peaked at this time. Ever since coming out into civilization, he prided himself on rarely feeling fear, but, seeing the arrival of that high spirit, and Janica, who were both looking for Tanya, make the situation even more difficult. At least that's what Zix thought at the moment. With the news of Ed's death, he felt that the two of them might have lost their minds. Realizing that, Zix then decided, Realizing his attitude, Janica then asked him to wait for a while. She had something to say about Ed, but before Janica could even say anything, Zix suddenly cast a magic on the wall. Nearby, his magic cast produced a large enough impact that made dust fly. Tanya coughed as a result of the dust generated by his magic. Zix then told her to listen to him carefully. Tanya then immediately put her ears when she heard that, while pointing towards the wall she had hollowed out. Zix then said to her, "Follow this path. When you meet a branching route, take the route to the west. If you keep running as fast as you can, you will reach the end of the building. When you are free from pursuit, look for a place to ask for help. As a descendant of the Roth-Taylor family, you should look for people who have ties to the royal authority or noble families that you know." Hearing that, Tanya then hesitantly asked him, "But, what about you?" While putting up a fighting position, Zix said that he would hold them as long as possible so that they could not chase her. It might be impossible, but, hearing that, Tanya then confusedly asked him, "Why did you go this far?" Zix replied, "I would not do this if you were not Ed's senior sister." He told her to consider herself lucky, and told her to run away from there immediately. Hearing that, Tanya did not ask him anything else, and immediately ran towards the route he had said. Seeing that, Zix exhaled for a moment, then prepared to face the opponent that he himself knew was impossible for him to defeat. He then said to Janica, "If it's like this, whatever I say you won't listen to it. I fully understand those feelings, because I have also been in love with someone." Janica was explaining the real situation to Lortel, but she was then surprised when she heard Zix's words. Zix continued, "Just imagining losing someone like that, it's unbearably painful, your whole body burns with flames of anger, it's inevitable, because it's someone you love." Janica Sr., you loved Ed Sr. more than anyone else. How earnest and bittersweet your feelings for Ed Sr. were. How could I not know? Zix said that so passionately that it made Janica's face turn red from blushing, but Zix's words did not stop there. Those passionate feelings you had for Ed Sr. will remain in your heart one way or another, becoming a part of you. But, before Zix could continue his words, a fireball suddenly shot out and attacked him. The impact of the fireball was so powerful that it broke through the wall of the Ophilus Hall, and threw him out of the building. One attack from Janica instantly beat Zix and knocked him down. Janica then walked over to him. She beat her staff against his chest and said that he was not dead yet. With a blushing face, Janica once again said that Ed was not dead, he was still alive, so she begged him to stop saying that. Meanwhile, in the garden in front of the Ophilus Hall, under the moonlight that illuminated the night sky, Ed and Lucy were still hugging tightly at this time. Spring water began to fall, washing the petals of the flowers scattered along the roadside, along with the fragrance of garden flowers. After the spring rain washed away, the season began to reveal itself in a new light. Emotions were the same. Lucy then recalled the memories when she had a fever from playing under the rain. After letting go of everything and getting an explanation for it, even a relationship that was once stable could change into a new phase. All this time, Lucy thought that her feelings for Glock were the same as her feelings for Ed, but those overlapping feelings began to change, becoming smooth and attractive. A question then arose, what made it different? As the rain that drenched them slowly stopped, Lucy suddenly let go of her hug and pushed his body away. Ed was then confused by it. Lucy's behavior was completely different and seemed uncharacteristic. Ed could only be confused by it. He then tried to call her, but his call triggered a big reaction in Lucy. Her face turned red after hearing him call her name. It was just a normal call, but her heart felt like it was on fire. Then, Lucy finally realized her true feelings. Back when Lucy used to lie on the roof of the Ed cabin, she used to smell the grass. The faint scent of grass had a calming effect on the mind. From the hay stacked beside the cabin, occasionally the fresh scent of grass could be smelled by her. She didn't hate that scent, so she usually just let it go and continued lazing around. But the maids didn't like it. The body of a person who smoked daily would carry a strong tobacco scent, while the girl who grew up frolicking in the peach orchard always had a faint peach scent lingering in her hair. To put it simply, once you notice someone's natural scent, ignoring or erasing it is difficult. Just like right now, as Ed walked up to her, she could smell the familiar scent of grass. Without noticing the strangeness in Lucy, Ed then muttered. He said that there were many things he needed to do. He didn't have much time. The academy staff would be coming soon. Since the situation was already like this, he realized that he had to explain the situation, but, Ed said that he couldn't tell her too much, after thinking for a while. For now, he thought he should at least tell Clebius, Elvira, Zix, and Lortel. At the mention of their names, he suddenly remembered his sister. He knew that Janica was out looking for her at the moment. Ed then picks up Lucy's witch hat which fell and gave it back to her. He also took Lucy to check the condition of the others. While the rain had stopped, but Lucy instead asked about what he had said earlier. She seemed to have just woken up from her reverie. Seeing that, Ed then realized that she had not listened to what he had said earlier. He then told her to listen carefully. Whether she liked it or not, you have to go to the disciplinary committee. Besides, Clebius and Elvira are also seriously injured. You have to apologize to them. Lucy was surprised and confused to hear him ask her to apologize. It seemed to be a foreign action to her. Ed explained, they were injured because they tried to stop you. Based on my observations, Elvira seemed to lose almost all the magic engineering tools she had made a long time ago, but Lucy seemed reluctant to do that. She felt that she was not at fault. They were the ones who came forward rashly, not realizing her complaint. Ed continued his words, while Clebius, his bleeding was like a waterfall. Hearing that, Lucy again inwardly disagreed with his words. She felt that Clebius' bleeding was not caused by her but by his own sword. The magic you used was harsh from their perspective, but you still need to apologize. Lucy felt aggrieved when she heard that. She then tried to defend herself. From Lucy's point of view, she had done her best to ensure that no one was fatally injured from her attack. But, before Lucy could say anything, she was then surprised. Ed could only sigh helplessly at her attitude. He then said to her, if you really don't want to, let me take responsibility and explain everything. Lucy's body seemed to freeze when she heard that. She felt very sad to see Ed sigh to that extent. Various bad possibilities then appeared in her head, being treated pitifully, being hated by everyone, and Ed being disappointed in her. Those things made her feel like suffocating. She then immediately said to him that she would apologize. Ed was happy to hear that. It was a wise decision. Lucy was completely overwhelmed by the smell of grass that Ed released. When looking at him, Ed felt like she was not hurt. He was not at all surprised by it. He felt that it was a natural thing. He then invited her to hurry up. They didn't have much time. Lucy could only stand transfixed at this time. The smell of the grass, even if she smelled it casually, even if it was only for a moment, the scent could make her choke and make her back heat up. Lucy was really confused. How did it come to this? She had only thought that she was just a person who looked after the perfect place to take a nap, but Lucy then recalled her life with Ed over the past year, eating together by the fireplace, hugging him while he was reading, sleeping on his lap. Lucy then continued to remember the events she had experienced during this 1 year of life with Ed, and when Ed walked past her, Lucy was then again overwhelmed by the scent of grass that he gave off. Ed muttered, Janica must be very difficult in finding Tanya. Again, I owe her a favor. I'd better finish this soon. Then, I should also do something to repay Janica. But, when Ed was about to walk away from there, he was then confused and surprised when Lucy suddenly held the hem of his robe. With teary eyes, Lucy asked him, does it have to be now? Ed was then confused at her expression. In front of the Ophelis Hall, central entrance, as the sun gradually revealed itself, the atmosphere returned to peace at this time. Everyone was now gathered there. Zix was now apologizing to Janica for his misunderstanding, while Clebius and Elvira were currently sitting side by side while sleeping. When Ed saw them all, he was then sure that no one was missing. Everything is here. But, Ed then felt confused when he looked at someone. It was Lortel. Seeing her who turned her body while covering her face, he then confusedly asked, what are you doing? Lortel was then surprised by his sudden question. She then cleared her throat for a moment to calm herself. With a smiling face, Lortel then told him that she had expected him to survive. Hearing that, Ed then apologized to her for worrying her, but Lortel immediately said that he didn't need to apologize. If you think logically, anyone can know that he is not a person who will fall easily. Among the magic engineering materials he asked her for was something like Delheim's hourglass. For merchants, staying calm and rational is always essential. Lortel said that she was just verifying the facts calmly. She then asked Zix, right, Zix? Zix, who initially had a questioning expression, then closed his eyes and confirmed her words. Lortel did not show any emotional reaction at all. Lortel was happy to hear that. She then said, of course, Tanya's behavior was also very suspicious, and although there were some harsh words spoken, there was still no physical fight. Six was a bit speechless hearing that, but he then could only helplessly confirm her words. Lortel then walked over to Ed and said, "How could I have thought that Ed Sr. would die?" With a blushing face. Lortel said that seeing his face now made her mind at ease, but honestly, she thought she felt a little worried earlier. Lortel then looked into his eyes and said, "Come to think of it, you did make us worry." Ed did not argue with that. Lortel continued, "In this world nothing is free, so, Senior have to compensate for my worry, right?" Just as Lortel said that, Ed was then surprised when Lortel suddenly pulled his collar, not giving Ed time to react. Lortel then stood on tiptoe to reach his face, but, when Lortel had almost reached her goal, she was then surprised when she saw Lucy suddenly appear and push her body away from Ed. They were then surprised by her sudden appearance, and when Ed's feet touched her slightly, Lucy's body suddenly seemed to be triggered by something. The environment was suddenly silent for a moment at this time. In the midst of their shock, seeing Lucy in front of her and her strange behavior, bad possibilities then appeared in Lortel's mind. Ed then patted Lucy's head and asked her, "What's wrong with you?" Lortel just said that she was also worried. There was no need to go that far. Ed said that he understood that her emotions were still subdued, but what Ed didn't know was, his small action made Lucy's head feel like exploding at the moment. Normally, Lucy's actions would not cause any feelings, but a girl's intuition seemed to scream loudly when she saw that. Janica then immediately pulled Lucy away from Ed and said that she was too close. This was an emergency situation. As Janica hugged her body tightly, Lucy then immediately pushed her body away. The situation then deadlocked with the three girls both staring with a threatening look, while Ed felt confused and did not understand what was happening to the three of them. Zix looked at them with an interested look. He seemed to know very well what was happening to the three of them, while Zix was sparkling and excited about what was going on. Someone suddenly called them. It was Elvira. Seeing them who seemed to be busy with their own affairs, she asked, "Don't we lack a lot of time?" Ed confirmed that, the academy staff would be here soon. After that, Ed then told them that he wanted to hide the fact that he managed to survive and explained the situation briefly. Lucy also apologized to Clebius and Elvira. After that, they decided to jointly look for Tanya, who escaped. While looking at Zix, Ed felt like he was a bit disappointed. But before reversing the petrified people, they aligned their stories about why this happened. After putting Nox and Caden, who had been tied into a place, they all then together walked away from there. After who knows how long, Nox then woke up, and slowly opened both eyes. The lonely garden scene then gradually appeared in his sight. Ed thought, before anyone knows that he is still alive, he must immediately disappear from the academy. In the same night, under the moonlight shining in the night sky, Clebius, who had lost consciousness, suddenly opened his eyes at this time. Seeing his body that had been completely clean without the slightest wound, he confusedly wondered, what happened? Was this magic? In the midst of his confusion, something suddenly blocked his view, and when he looked up, he was then surprised to find that it was a head. It was certainly Elvira's head. Elvira then scolded him for being noisy. With a scared face, Clebius once again wondered, what happened? Am I dead? With all the mess I've made, you could say it's natural that I would die. Stupidly, seeing that, Elvira then irritably pulled his hair and said, "The academy staff will be here soon. You only need to testify that you managed to stop Lucy." Clebius was then confused and surprised to hear that. He asked, "How can I explain that I stopped that monster?" Elvira was silent for a moment hearing that. For an alchemist, discovering new things is always a pleasant experience. She faced various surprising things today. Lucy was willing to bow her head politely and heal all the wounds suffered by Clebius. Lortel promised a generous confidentially fee and vouched for Ed Roth-Taylor. Even Ed Roth-Taylor's word today was truly a series of unexpected events. Elvira then pulled Clebius' head back into her lap and told him to just rest. Clebius cried out in pain and once again asked, what exactly was going on? Elvira was just silent in the face of his confusion. The environment suddenly fell silent for a moment amidst the silence of the two of them. After sighing for a moment, Clebius then muttered, honestly, saying it also feels useless because I definitely have to start all over again. What stops her is not me, but precisely Ed Roth-Taylor. In the end, I couldn't event when foolishly again. Clebius could only sigh helplessly after saying that. Elvira smiled slightly at that. If there was anything she could call the most significant new discovery, she then gently called out to Clebius. But, Clebius didn't seem to hear her call. He continued to mumble, life really is a piece of crap. hearing her call earlier, Clebius was sure she would want to reprimand him again for continuing to whine, but, contrary to his expectations, Elvira did not want to reprimand him. On the contrary, she agreed with his words earlier. Clebius was then confused and surprised by that. While looking towards the night sky, Elvira said that this world was indeed a piece of crap. Elvira had a lot to say, but she simply agreed with Clebius's words. For a moment, the two of them both raised their heads in silence and looked at the night sky. Up there, the stars shine quietly, unaware of the brilliance they possess. Meanwhile somewhere, in a lush forest near the academy, while Tanya was running with all her might, she suddenly tripped, which made her fall to the ground. It made her clothes dirty and filled with mud, and when she got up and tried to run again, she suddenly couldn't move her legs. Facing that, Tanya sadly thought that she couldn't stop. She felt that they must be chasing her now. She couldn't get caught, but what Tanya didn't know now was, she was not being chased by anyone, and no one thought that she was the one who had killed Ed. Tanya then tried her best to get back up and run away from there. She realized that she had to clear her name for the accusation of killing Ed. She had to find the truth, so, she absolutely could not be caught. The scene was really sad, which could make one's sympathy grow. But Tanya could only rely on herself at this time. We could only encourage her silently and pray that someone could find her and end this misunderstanding. When morning came, a peaceful atmosphere then returned to Sylvania. Professor Plubane then reported last night's incident to Principal Abel. The investigation into the death of Ed Roth-Taylor is nearing its conclusion. We reviewed the scene using flame scrying magic. Although unable to recreate the scene perfectly, the retainers stabbed the victim, Ed Roth-Taylor, and it was confirmed that he fell over the cliff. The retainers of the Roth-Taylor family, believed to be the culprits, have been detained in a facility under the academy. The punishment should be transferred to the imperial family, but we need to confirm and report the facts first. Hearing the report, Principal Abel felt that Ed Roth-Taylor's death was almost confirmed. He then told Professor Plubane to prepare the details of the report to be sent to the imperial family. Professor Plubane understood. He would arrange it. While looking at the reenactment of Ed's death displayed on the pearl in his hand, Principal Abel continued, "We also have our own tasks to deal with. The cascading effects caused by the death of a student really exceeded our expectations. Lucy, who was devastated by Ed Roth-Taylor's death, went on a violent rampage, causing the students to be evacuated in the middle of the night." While looking at the file containing Ed Roth-Taylor's profile, Principal Abel believes that he must have had a profound influence on many people. He is also somewhat relieved at this time. In the end, Lucy was subdued by the second-year top-ranked student of the combat faculty, Clebius Nortondale, and her custody was secured while she was sitting quietly in the rose garden. The situation was resolved smoothly. He just knew there was a student with such high potential. He was very impressive. He then ordered the academy officials in front of him to prepare an award for Clebius on behalf of the academy. As for Lucy, convene a disciplinary committee to conclude the matter. After a while passed, they then brought Lucy to the courtroom. The person in front of her at the moment is the vice principal of Sylvania Academy. Rachel, Elvira and Clebius are also present at the hearing. There are petitions from the injured students, Clebius and Elvira. Some of the damages that occurred in last night's incident include the third-floor dormitory wall near Tanya's room, the outer wall of the corridor opposite, the marble floor of the rose garden, and the gazebo. Although it cannot be considered trivial, but the damage is much smaller when compared to the Ophilus Hall occupation incident. While looking at Lucy, Vice Principal Rachel helplessly thought, if only there is one more thing that complements, this can be solved with a light punishment, namely self-introspection. But, looking at Lucy's sleepy face, she felt that it was difficult. Not only the academy, but even the imperial family recognized that the Sylvania Academy was the best educational institution in this era. The reputation comes from the fact that they have successfully produced the legendary genius mage. Since the academy itself has promoted this fact, then expulsion from the academy is not an option. Ideally, they don't want to leave a record of severe punishment, but what makes her dizzy is, how can they give a light punishment if she doesn't even introspect herself? Looking at Lucy, who yawned boredly, she was annoyed. She felt that she didn't have the dignity of being the academy's best student. After calming down for a moment, the Vice Principal Rachel then read out the penalty decision: the revocation of this semester's scholarship, 10 days of suspension, withdrawal of access to welfare facilities for 70 days, and lowering of the practical evaluation score by 2 levels. in addition, withdrawal of the right to live in Offalis Hall. She then handed a paper to Lucy and told her to sign there if she agreed to the penalty. Hearing that, Lucy didn't even defend herself, she boldly said yes, although this penalty seemed severe, but in fact it was the opposite. Losing the scholarship meant little to Lucy. The Glock Scholarship Foundation had already paid her tuition fees in full. Besides, even if her grades were lowered, her grades were still far superior to Zix, who was ranked second in class. As for the welfare facilities, it was something she had never used. Basically, this penalty had no impact on her. But Lucy was then surprised when she heard someone suddenly interrupt. That person was Maya. Maya then introduced herself and said that she was present as a witness as well as the manager of Offalis Hall. With all due respect, she begged Vice Principal Rachel to reconsider regarding Lucy's discipline. She did not believe that these penalties could lead to genuine remorse, so she felt that this penalty needed to be revised. Hearing that, Vice Principal Rachel then reread the penalty decision filed in her hand. Seeing that, Lucy immediately felt panic. She then said that she would sign it right now. But, before Lucy could reach the penalty decision file in the hands of Vice Principal Rachel, someone suddenly held her body from behind. It was of course Maya. Maya explained, removing Lucy from Offalis Hall was not a punishment but a reward for her. Therefore, she advised the vice principal to limit her access rights to leave the dormitory as much as possible. House arrest would be a more appropriate punishment for her. Lucy's face paled upon hearing that. She then frantically asked the vice principal to give her the paper. Maya continued, my team in Offalis Hall will be watching her for 24 hours very closely. The maids of Offalis Hall seemed to be on fire when they heard that. Lucy then struggling and told her to let her go. Her panic had peaked at this time. Hearing her proposal, Vice Principal Rachel thought for a moment. She then agreed to her proposal. Lucy's sentence would change to 30 days of house arrest. Vice Principal Rachel was rather grateful at this time. Grateful that no severe punishment was recorded. Maya then thanked her for agreeing to her proposal. Lucy felt like crying at this time. She then frantically tried to stop it. She apologized and said that she regretted her actions. She begged, anything, as long as it wasn't that. But, her request would certainly be ignored. Lucy's body then stiffened when Maya suddenly called her, with a sharp gaze directed at her. Maya said that they would make sure that she could not get out at all. They would carry out a strict and thorough approach. Lucy could only swallow her saliva hearing that. After Lucy's punishment was successfully decided, Maya and the maids then walked back to the Offalis Hall while carrying Lucy. Vice Principal Rachel did not know what to say when she saw that. When the news of Lucy's punishment reached Ed, although the punishment seemed light, but he knew that it was an unbearable punishment for Lucy. While pouring the soup she had made into a bowl, Janica agreed with him, also. Thanks to Elvira and Clebius who represented him to speak at the disciplinary committee, the situation could be handled well. Janica then smiled at him and handed the soup to him. It was beef stew. She often made it at home. She said that this was one of her specialties. Ed then clapped his hands in amazement at the cooking. Janica looked proud to see that. She insisted on doing everything, washing, spirit class, academy class, even cooking. It was moments like this that made him think that this was really genuine kindness. Putting that aside, Ed then went back to thinking about this year's Student Council President election. In this Student Council President election, the three variables that worried him the most were, first, Princess Phinia, who seemed to have lost her motivation in becoming Student Council President; second, Tanya Roth-Taylor, who was supposed to play the role of antagonist opposing Princess Phinia, was currently missing; and lastly, the two retainers from Roth-Taylor family, Caden and Knox, who were currently being detained by the Academy. The news of their detention was not good news for him, because he had to inform Crefin of his death, and remove his existence from his awareness. He had gone to great lengths to put on that show, but now, the situation was even more complicated. Caden and Knox were now detained by the Academy for being suspects in his murder. Ed thought that he had to find a way to release them immediately, and convince Crefin that he was really dead. After that, only then could he end this frustrating life of seclusion. There were so many things he had to do. Ed could only sigh helplessly at the thought. Janica suddenly looked gloomy and sad at this time. She said, Ed was a noble heir to a duke's family. Even after being exiled, he's caught up in all sorts of trouble. Ed was then confused to hear her suddenly say such a thing. Janica continued, I'm just a commoner from a rural farmhouse, so I don't really understand what Ed's life feels like. That's why I can't even comfort Ed properly, saying things like it's no big deal or cheer up, as if I know everything. Those kinds of words are meaningless, and they don't feel genuine anyway. Janica really felt sad about it. Hearing that, Ed then asked her not to think too much about it. What she did was more than enough for him, even though Ed said so. But Janica was not satisfied. She wanted to help him solve his problem. This was just her selfish desire. While smiling sweetly at him, Janica said that she just didn't want him to suffer anymore. Ed suddenly blushed when he saw her smile, and the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Lately, every time he was alone with Janica, sometimes there was always a moment of awkward silence like this. Not that he felt uncomfortable or anything, but he couldn't find a reason for this strange feeling between them. Ed then tried to calm himself down. He said that he was very grateful, no one cared about him this much. Janica was surprised for a moment to hear that. While laughing awkwardly, she said that hearing it was really embarrassing. The point is, Janica said that their priority now is to find Tanya. They don't know where she is and what she is doing. She also feels that he seems to be worried about her. Hearing that, Ed then thought for a moment. He said that he already had a premonition about it. At first, he was surprised by Tanya, who was different from his memories. In The Failed Swordsman of Sylvania, Tanya Roth-Taylor was a strong, noble, and fearless person. He had seen Tanya's firm nature with his own eyes. Based on that, Ed was sure that Tanya would be able to overcome her situation. Even now, he was sure that she was coping with her problems and planning for the future, as she always did. With her dignified and graceful demeanor, Ed smiled slightly at the thought. But, contrary to his guess, Tanya was now seen in a luxurious room while trembling with fear. It was Princess Phenia's room. While looking at her, Tanya swore that she never ordered anyone to kill her brother. Phenia was silent for a moment hearing that. Before Tanya appeared, she received the news of Ed Roth-Taylor's death. When it happened, he cancelled almost all pending appointments and expedited the completion of several tasks. She really wanted to resolve the complicated relationship between the two of them. She wanted to find a moment to chat with him properly, but, with just one day remaining, he died. If only she was 1 day earlier, this definitely wouldn't have happened. Her petty pride always prevented her from acting in time. Phenia was really annoyed with herself. Right when she just entered this academy, she had already collected data and continued to mature to achieve her goal, which was to become the student council president of Sylvania Academy. Compared to the power possessed by the imperial family, this was just a small achievement, but within Sylvania Academy, this would make her have a great influence. She didn't want to continue to be the third princess who always relied on the power of the imperial family. She aimed to establish an independent position as student council president of Sylvania Academy, not as someone supported by the imperial family, but by relying on her own power, to confront the darkness of the Roth-Taylor family and the imperial family. But, the more she thought about it further, the more she realized that she was someone who should not hold power. Phenia could only cry sadly thinking about it. At that moment, someone suddenly entered her room and respectfully called her. He asked her if he could ask for a moment of her time. Phenia realized that it was Claire's voice, and when she looked back, she then saw Claire as well as someone with a messy appearance. Seeing that person, Phenia then realized that it was Tanya, although the full details had not been confirmed. Based on the Academy's preliminary investigation, it is likely that Ed has been killed by retainers from the Roth-Taylor family. Excluding the exiled Ed, the only remaining heir of the Roth-Taylor family on the Arkan Island is. Realizing her gaze, Tanya then said fearfully, "The princess must not believe it either, but I swear it wasn't me. I never harmed my brother." But, as Tanya tried hard to convince Phenia, she was then surprised, when Phenia suddenly hugged her. Phenia was sure that Tanya must have gone through a lot of difficult things. She then told her to go inside and tell her everything that had happened until now. Phenia realized that she had to learn from mistakes, not to misjudge just because someone bears the name Roth-Taylor. That's roughly the story of why Tanya could be in Phenia's room. Seeing Tanya, who was crying and her body shaking violently, Phenia then walked over to her, and told her that she decided to take her word for it, so, until the situation was clearer, she would hide her in the royal dormitory. Her words seemed to have calmed Tanya down. Tanya then thanked her. She was very grateful. She said that she owed her a favor. Phenia smiled softly at that. She said no, this was indeed something she should do. She assured her, for now, she would be safe here. After her interaction with Tanya, Phenia felt that she was really a fragile girl. She couldn't understand that she would even consider getting involved in a political plan against a girl like her. At this moment, someone suddenly entered her room, and reported to her that there was a guest waiting in the reception room. Phinia understood. She then told the person to process the next schedule. With a serious expression, Phinia then stood up and walked towards the reception room. She was now aware that the real opponent lies elsewhere. Seeing the person, Phinia then asked how she was. She replied, "Ed's death is indeed regrettable, but we must continue to conduct the Academy's affairs in our own way." She then asked her opinion regarding that. Hearing that, Phinia did not mince words anymore. She then asked her, "So, what is the matter with you looking for me?" She smiled slightly at that. Amidst the chaos that engulfed the Academy's political scene, the only person who fully understood the bigger picture was none other than Lortel Ketchum. Lortel then said that she was here to ask why she was hiding Tanya. In this academy, there seemed to be no secrets that could be hidden from her.